Thus says the Lord, sing aloud with gladness for Jacob, and raise shouts for the chief of the nations. Proclaim, give praise, and say, save, O Lord, your people, the remnant of Israel. See, I'm going to bring them from the land of the north, and gather them from the farthest parts of the earth, among them the blind and the lame, those with child and those in labor, together, a great company, they shall return here. With weeping they shall come, and with consolations I will lead them back. I will let them walk by the brooks of water, in a straight path in which they shall not stumble. For I have become a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Hear what the Spirit is saying to God's people.
Thanks be to God.
The second reading is from the letter to the Hebrews. The former priests were many in number, because they were prevented by death from continuing in office. But Jesus holds his priesthood permanently, because he continues forever. Consequently, he is able for all time to save those who approach God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. For it is fitting that we should have such a high priest, holy, blameless, undefiled, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. Unlike the other high priests, he has no need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then those for the people. This he did once for all when he offered himself. For the law appoints as high priests those who are subject to weakness, but the word of the oath, which came later than the law, appoints a son who has been made perfect forever. Hear what the Spirit is saying to God's people.
Thanks be to God.
The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Jesus and his disciples came to Jericho. As he and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus stood still and said, Call him here. And they called the blind man, saying to him, Take heart, get up, he is calling you. For throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. And Jesus said to him, What do you want me to do for you? The blind man said to him, My teacher, let me see again. Jesus said to him, Go, your faith has made you well. Immediately he regained his sight and followed him on the way. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
We have in the lesson from Jeremiah an account that the time will come when those who have been scattered abroad will be brought back as the remnant of Israel. The Lord will bring them back, and it will be a place of goodness and safety. Now, it comes near the end of the book of Jeremiah. The last chapters or so are dealing with that kind of consolation. Earlier on, of course, he has some very harsh things to say. In fact, at one point, he's dumped down into a cistern. They're trying to get rid of him, but he's able to escape and get away. But he speaks of those who have been rejected, those who have been neglected, those who have been lost, and being returned, the blind and the deaf, those with children, those in labor, those who have been scattered are being brought back, being whole. And this ties, I think, in with the lesson we have from the Gospel of Mark. Jesus and his disciples have been in Jericho, and events have taken place there. I think, if I remember rightly, that's where we have the account with Zechariah up in the sycamore tree that comes and is with Jesus, takes him into his home. Zacchaeus, by the way. Too many guys with Z's in their names. But as Jesus and his disciples and this crowd are leaving Jericho, we come across Bartimaeus, the beggars, by the roadside, and he calls out. He's heard about what has been taking place in Jericho. He's been there for quite some time. He has his own particular spots right over there. And he knows what's going on. He knows the community. He knows the people. And he's heard about this Jesus. And perhaps now is the time that he will be able to get something good from this event, and cries out. Well, you do remember that Jesus and this disciple and this crowd have been there for some time, and they're on their way out of town. They're in point A, they're in Jericho. They're going to go some other place, geographically. And they're probably tired, and they're probably hot, and their feet hurt, and they've been busy all this time. And now there's this interruption coming from Bartimaeus, crying out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And of course, the reaction for so many of the people is, why don't you just be quiet? Stay where you are. We're busy. And he's not about to let that take place. He's not about to be rejected. And so even more loudly, he calls out to Jesus. And Jesus responds to that. Well, bring him here. Get out of your seat to Bartimaeus and come on. They bring him over to Jesus. And of course, you've heard the dialogue. What would you like me to do for you? I'd like to see you again. Okay. Your faith has made you whole. He can see. And then he follows along the way. Now, what's interesting, I think, is that Mark seems to have condensed into this one little event the whole truth of the saving gospel of Jesus. Put it all into that one point. There are those who have been rejected, have set aside, have no longer been part of the living community, the blind man at the side of the road. And he's called into this. Now, what's interesting is that when they call him, they say, get up out of your seat, arise. Get out of your seat and come over. The healing takes place, and Bartimaeus follows them on the way. The word road and the word way are the same word in Greek. You remember your Acts of the Apostles, the disciples of Jesus are referred to those following the way with a capital W. What has occurred here, I think, is that not only is there this plan to go from point A to point B, geographically, there is a movement here of a new way altogether, not just traveling a road, but a new life altogether, the following of the way. And if you will, and I was reminded of this last night, that the way is not just from point A to point B, it's point from alpha to omega, from the beginning to the end. The whole life of the way is the relationship with Jesus. So what occurs with Bartimaeus is, yes, he gets his vision back, but he gets a new understanding of the fullness of God's mercy that has been given to him by Jesus. So it's no longer just he's going to be able to get from one place to another. He can see where he's going. He's going to be living a new way altogether. He's going to follow Jesus on the way. On the road, yes, from A to B, but also from the beginning to the end, which is from now into heaven itself. So in Bartimaeus' account, we see the fullness of the gospel truth, what Jesus has come to do. It's interesting that all of this takes place. He gets out of his seat and comes to Jesus. He follows along, and we never heard anything more about Bartimaeus. Have no idea what happened to him afterwards. But if he's on that way, following Jesus, has that new life centered in Jesus, he's going to tell that story again, somewhere, somehow. The wonderful thing is that though he had been refused at the beginning, he was not about to allow that to happen. It's so easy when things become an interruption. We want that to say, oh, well, now just don't bother with this. We'll go on our way. You take care of yourself. Bartimaeus reminds us that we don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. When someone calls out to us and says, save me, help me, as Bartimaeus is doing, we're forced to respond. Jesus is not allowed the crowd to say, don't leave him alone. He says, bring him to me. And when they brought him to Jesus, those wonderful events took place. When somebody says to me, when somebody says to you, I need to know, I need to come to Jesus, I need you to help me, we need to bring them in. Okay? Provide what they need. And a new way, of course, will open for them and for us. Because when Bartimaeus goes along the way following Jesus, there's one more that's been added to that flock. One more, like Jeremiah is speaking of, being brought back to wholeness, brought back to that living relationship with God. Bartimaeus is insistent, he receives, and he follows the way. A good measure and example for us all.